November. The so far has been a train wreck for Theresa May, but out of the carnage SHES lost 2 ministers in a week. Some clarity has emerged on what it would take for this British Prime Minister to fire someone and what can knock Brexit out of the political spotlight. Here are our 8 things we've learned. Point 1. When it rains, it pours. The saying goes that a week is a long time in politics. That's all the time it took for May to lose Defence Secretary Michael Fallin in the sexual harassment scandal rocking Westminster and her International Development Secretary, Priti Patel, over a stack of revelations about secret meetings with Israeli officials including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. To make matters worse, 2 other senior figures are in hot water. Officials are investigating harassment and pornography allegations against May's deputy, Damien Green, which he strongly denies. Separately, Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson faces calls to resign for a loose comment about a British woman currently in jail in Iran that may lengthen her sentence. Point 2. If pushed far enough, May will act by Monday afternoon. It was clear that Patel had been running a freelance foreign policy in one of the most sensitive, complex regions in the world. That on its own would, under normal circumstances, have been enough for her to be fired. On Tuesday morning, May learned from the BBC about a proposal Patel had made to give aid money to the Israeli military, yet Patel was still allowed to get onto a plane to Kenya for a scheduled trip. So when May finally took the plunge, it didn't come across as an act of strength. The question was whether she would fire Patel, which could be humiliating, or force a resignation that allowed her minister to leave with more dignity. She chose the latter, though it looked a lot like a dismissal. Patel was summoned back early, arrived to 10 Downing Street via a back entrance and was kept waiting. Shortly after their 30-minute meeting, May's office released 2 letters: Patel's resignation and May's acceptance of it as the right decision. "This situation demonstrates May's weakness," said Nick Anstead, a lecturer in political communication at the London School of Economics. "She is very vulnerable to political events that destabilize her government, because she only has very limited room for sacking and reshuffling ministers." Point 3. May commands little internal respect. That Patel thought she could sit down with someone as high-profile as Netanyahu without first running the idea past her own prime minister feeds the impression that May has no control over her government. That is a marked change from her first year on the job, when ministers had to get permission from the Premier's office to say anything at all. Her authority, along with the ability to hold the reins, collapsed with June's election drubbing. These type of events play into a broader narrative that the government is weak and the Prime Minister not in control, Anstead said. Moreover, Patel's letter contained a hint of menace. The pro-Brexit campaigner said she planned to take an active role representing local residents, now SHES, outside government, and to speak up for our country, our national interests, and the great future that Britain has as a free, independent and sovereign nation. Point 4. Boris Johnson has lost French. The Foreign Secretary gave a statement to the House of Commons on Tuesday, including a clarification of his comments about the jailed British-Iranian woman. What was striking was the silence from the benches behind him. Barely any Tory stood up to speak out against demands for his resignation from the main opposition Labour Party. Johnson's inability to summon defenders suggests his tenure as the UK's top diplomat hasn't won him many admirers. But will he be the next to go? Probably not. Most other prime ministers of recent times would have sacked Boris because it's not been one mistake, it's the way he operates. He makes these gaffes and doesn't focus on detail. But HES really important in government to maintain May's fragile consensus on Brexit, said Andrew Gamble, professor of politics at the University of Sheffield. She doesn't want somebody that ambitious on the backbenches. Point 5. Brexit fatigue. An important thing the government said Tuesday about its Brexit strategy was barely noticed amid the furore over Patel and Johnson. The government has boasted of the deep analysis of the economic impact of Brexit that it has conducted. But when ordered to produce the work in response to lawmakers' demands, ministers explained that it wasn't quite as previously described and would take 3 weeks to pull together. In different circumstances, this would have been big news. Point 6. Labour is getting smarter. The opposition is gunning for another snap election and calls itself a government in waiting. It has chosen this week to do little except stay quiet. Standing still and looking as your opponents make mistakes is a political skill that Jeremy Corbyn has mastered. Labour has also requested more details about Patel's meetings in Israel, suggesting her resignation may not be quite enough for May to lay the matter to rest. Point 7. But the polls aren't shifting still. Polls suggest little change in public opinion since the election. Corbyn may have outperformed everyone's expectations, including his own in June, but it's also possible HES hit his ceiling, with Labour a point or two ahead of the Conservatives, but no more. 8. This can drag on and on. It would be premature to take bets on May's future. With each crisis, her premiership appears less tenable, yet the last thing the Conservatives want is a long and protracted leadership contest. The political calculation would change if the perfect candidate materialised and could be crowned immediately. But how likely is that, with the Tories still so divided until then? May stays. Her greatest strength is that there is no obvious candidate to replace her who could unite the Conservative Party or obviously change her political fortunes, the LSE's Anstead said. All in all, it looks like we might have a period of what is essentially chaotic inertia, with assistance by Svenja O'Donnell.